Hello. Tonight, we begin with the most fascinating fairy tale. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Enchanted Wreath, told by a Pathan to Major Campbell. Once upon a time, there lived near a forest a man and his wife and 2 girls. One girl was the daughter of the man, and the other the daughter of his wife. And the man's daughter was good and beautiful, but the woman's daughter was cross and ugly. However, her mother did not know that, but thought her the most bewitching maiden that ever was seen. One day, the man called to his daughter and bade her come with him into the forest to cut wood. They worked hard all day, but in spite of the chopping, they were very cold, for it rained heavily. And when they returned home, they were wet through. Then, to his vexation, the man found that he had left his axe behind him, and he knew that if it lay all night in the mud, it would become rusty and useless. So he said to his wife, "I have dropped my axe in the forest. Bid your daughter go and fetch it, for mine has worked hard all day and is both wet and weary." But the wife answered, "If your daughter is wet already, it is all the more reason that she should go and get the axe. Besides, she is a great, strong girl, and a little rain will not hurt her, while my daughter would be sure to catch a bad cold." By long experience, the man knew there was no good saying any more, and with a sigh, he told the poor girl she must return to the forest for the axe. The walk took some time, for it was very dark, and her shoes often stuck in the mud. But she was brave as well as beautiful, and never thought of turning back merely because the path was both difficult and unpleasant. At last, with her dress torn by brambles that she could not see, and her fact scratched by the twigs on the trees, she reached the spot where she and her father had been cutting in the morning, and found the ass in the place he had left it. To her surprise, 3 little doves were sitting on the handle, all of them looking very sad. "You poor little things," said the girl, stroking them. "Why do you sit there and get wet? Go and fly home to your nest. It will be much warmer than this. But first, eat this bread, which I saved from my dinner, and perhaps you will feel happier. It is my father's axe you are sitting on, and I must take it back as fast as I can, or I shall get a terrible scolding from my stepmother." She then crumbled the bread on the ground and was pleased to see the doves flutter quite cheerfully towards it. "Goodbye," she said, picking up the axe, and went her way homewards. By the time they had finished, all the crumbs the doves felt must better, and were able to fly back to their nest in the top of a tree. "That is a good girl," said one. "I really was too weak to stretch out a wing before she came. I should like to do something to show how grateful I am." "Well, let us give her a wreath of flowers that will never fade as long as she wears it," cried another, "and let the tiniest singing birds in the world sit amongst the flowers," rejoined the third. "Yes, that will do beautifully," said the first. And when the girl stepped into her cottage, a wreath of rosebuds was on her head, and a crowd of little birds were singing unseen. The father, who was sitting by the fire, thought that, in spite of her muddy clothes, he had never seen his daughter looking so lovely. But the stepmother and the other girl grew wild with envy. "How absurd to walk about on such a pouring night, dressed up like that," she remarked crossly, and roughly pulled off the wreath as she spoke, to place it on her own daughter. As she did so, the roses became withered and brown, and the birds flew out of the window. "See what a trumpery thing it is," cried the stepmother. "And now take your supper and go to bed, for it is near upon midnight." But though she pretended to despise the wreath, she longed none the less for her daughter to have one like it. Now it happened that the next evening, the father, who had been alone in the forest, came back a second time without his axe. The stepmother's heart was glad when she saw this, and she said quite mildly, "Why, you have forgotten your axe again, you careless man. But now your daughter shall stay at home, and mine shall go and bring it back." And throwing a cloak over the girl's shoulders, she bade her hasten to the forest. With a very ill grace, the damsel set forth, grumbling to herself as she went, for though she wished for the wreath, she did not at all want the trouble of getting it. By the time she reached the spot where her stepfather had been cutting the wood, the girl was in a very bad temper indeed. And when she caught sight of the axe, there were the 3 little doves with drooping heads and soiled, bedraggled feathers sitting on the handle. "You dirty creatures," cried she, "get away at once, or I will throw stones at you." And the doves spread their wings in a fright and flew up to the very top of a tree, their bodies shaking with anger. "What shall we do to revenge ourselves on her?" asked the smallest of the doves. "We were never treated like that before." "Never," said the biggest dove. "We must find some way of paying her back in her own coin." "I know," answered the middle dove. "She shall never be able to say anything but dirty creatures to the end of her life." "Oh, how clever of you! That will do beautifully," exclaimed the other two, and they flapped their wings and clucked so loud with delight and made such a noise that they woke up all the birds in the trees close by. "What in the world is the matter?" asked the birds sleepily. "That is our secret," said the doves. Meanwhile, the girl had reached home crosser than ever. But as soon as her mother heard her lift the latch of the door, she ran out to hear her adventures. "Well, did you get the wreath?" cried she. "Dirty creatures," answered her daughter. "Don't speak to me like that. What do you mean?" asked the mother again. "Dirty creatures," repeated the daughter, and nothing else could she say. Then the woman saw that something evil had befallen her, and turned in her rage to her stepdaughter. "You are at the bottom of this, I know," she cried, and as the father was out of the way, she took a stick and beat the girl till she screamed with pain and went to bed sobbing. If the poor girl's life had been miserable before, it was 10 times worse now. For the moment, her father's back was turned, the others teased and tormented her from morning till night, and their fury was increased by the sight of her wreath, which the doves had placed again on her head. Things went on like this for some weeks, when, one day, as the king's son was riding through the forest, he heard some strange birds singing more sweetly than birds had ever sung before. He tied his horse to a tree and followed where the sound led him. And, to his surprise, he saw before him a beautiful girl chopping wood, with a wreath of pink rosebuds, out of which the singing came. Standing in the shelter of a tree, he watched her a long while, and then, hat in hand, he went up and spoke to her. "Fair maiden, who are you? And who gave you that wreath of singing roses?" asked he. For the birds were so tiny that till you looked closely, you never saw them. "I live in a hut on the edge of the forest," she answered, blushing, for she had never spoken to a prince before. "As to the wreath, I know not how it came there, unless it may be the gift of some doves whom I fed when they were starving." The prince was delighted with this answer, which showed the goodness of the girl's heart. And besides, he had fallen in love with her beauty and would not be content till she promised to return with him to the palace and become his bride. The old king was naturally disappointed at his son's choice of a wife, as he wished him to marry a neighboring princess. But from his birth, the prince had always done exactly as he liked. Nothing was said, and a splendid wedding feast was got ready. The day after her marriage, the bride sent a messenger, bearing handsome presents to her father, and telling him of the good fortune which had befallen her. As may be imagined, the stepmother and her daughter were so filled with envy that they grew quite ill and had to take to their beds, and nobody would have been sorry if they had never got up again. But that did not happen. At length, however, they began to feel better, for the mother invented a plan by which she could be revenged on the girl who had never done her any harm. Her plan was this. In the town where she had lived before she was married, there was an old witch who had more skill in magic than any other witch she knew. To this witch she would go and beg her to make her a mask with the face of her stepdaughter. And when she had the mask, the rest would be easy. She told her daughter what she meant to do, and although the daughter could only say "dirty creatures" in answer, she nodded and smiled and looked well pleased. Everything fell out exactly as the woman had hoped. By the aid of her magic mirror, the witch beheld the new princess walking in her gardens in a dress of green silk, and in a few minutes had produced a mask so like her that very few people could have told the difference. However, she counseled the woman that when her daughter first wore it, for that, of course, was what she intended her to do, she had better pretend that she had a toothache and cover her head with a lace veil. The woman thanked her and paid her well and returned to her hut, carrying the mask under her cloak. In a few days, she heard that a great hunt was planned, and the prince would leave the palace very early in the morning, so that his wife would be alone all day. This was a chance not to be missed, and taking her daughter with her, she went up to the palace where she had never been before. The princess was too happy in her new home to remember all that she had suffered in the old one, and she welcomed them both gladly and gave them quantities of beautiful things to take back with them. At last, she took them down to the shore to see a pleasure boat which her husband had made for her. And here, the woman, seizing her opportunity, stole softly behind the girl and pushed her off the rock on which she was standing into the deep water, where she instantly sank to the bottom. Then she fastened the mask on her daughter, flung over her shoulders a velvet cloak which the princess had let fall, and finally arranged a lace veil over her head. "Rest your cheek on your hand, as if you were in pain, when the prince returns," said the mother. "And be careful not to speak, whatever you do. I will go back to the witch and see if she cannot take off the spell laid on you by those horrible birds. Ah, why did I not think of it before?" No sooner had the prince entered the palace than he hastened to the princess's apartments, where he found her lying on the sofa, apparently in great pain. "My dearest wife, what is the matter with you?" he cried, kneeling down beside her and trying to take her hand. But she snatched it away and, pointing to her cheek, murmured something he could not catch. "What is it? Tell me. Is the pain bad? When did it begin?" shall I send for your ladies? To bath the place?" asked the prince, pouring out these and a dozen other questions, to which the girl only shook her head. "But I can't leave you like this," he continued, starting up. "I must summon all the court physicians to apply soothing balsams to the sore place." And as he spoke, he sprang to his feet to go in search of them. Once came near her, the trick would at once be discovered, that she forgot her mother's counsel not to speak, and forgot even the spell that had been laid upon her. And catching hold of the prince's tunic, she cried in tones of entreaty, "Dirty creatures!" The young man stopped, not able to believe his ears, but supposed that pain had made the princess cross, as it sometimes does. However, he guessed somehow that she wised to be left alone, so he only said, "Well, I dare say a little sleep will do you good, if you can manage to get it, and that you will wake up better tomorrow." Now, that night happened to be very hot and airless, and the prince, after vainly trying to rest, at length got up and went to the window. Suddenly, he beheld in the moonlight a form with a wreath of roses on her head rise out of the sea below him and step onto the sands, holding out her arms as she did so towards the palace. "That maiden is strangely like my wife," thought he. "I must see her closer." And he hastened down to the water. But when he got there, the princess, for she indeed it was, had disappeared completely. And he began to wonder if his eyes had deceived him. The next morning, he went to the false bride's room, but her ladies told him she would neither speak nor get up, though she ate everything they set before her. The prince was sorely perplexed as to what could be the matter with her, for naturally he could not guess that she was expecting her mother to return every moment, and to remove the spell the doves had laid upon her, and meanwhile was afraid to speak, lest she should betray herself. At length, he made up his mind to summon all the court physicians. He did not tell her what he was going to do, lest it should make her worse, but he went himself and begged the 4 learned leeches attached to the king's person to follow him to the princess's apartments. Unfortunately, as they entered, the princess was so enraged at the sight of them that she forgot all about the doves and shrieked out, "Dirty creatures! Dirty creatures!" which so offended the physicians that they left the room at once, and nothing that the prince could say would prevail on them to remain. He then tried to persuade his wife to send them a message that she was sorry for her rudeness, but not a word would she say. Late that evening, when he had performed all the tiresome duties which fall to the lot of every prince, the young man was leaning out of his window, refreshing himself with the cool breezes that blew off the sea. His thoughts went back to the scene of the morning, and he wondered if, after all, he had not made a great mistake in marrying a low-born wife, however beautiful she might be. How could he have imagined that the quiet, gentle girl who had been so charming a companion to him during the first days of their marriage could have become, in a day, the rude, sulky woman who could not control her temper even to benefit herself? One thing was clear. If she did not change her conduct very shortly, he would have to send her away from court. He was thinking these thoughts when his eyes fell on the sea beneath him. And there, as before, was the figure that so closely resembled his wife, standing with her feet in the water, holding out her arms to him. "Wait for me. Wait for me. Wait for me," he cried, not even knowing he was speaking. But when he reached the shore, there was nothing to be seen but the shadows cast by the moonlight. A state ceremonial in a city some distance off caused the prince to ride away at daybreak, and he left without seeing his wife again. Perhaps she may have come to her senses by tomorrow, said he to himself. And anyhow, if I am going to send her back to her father, it might be better if we did not meet in the meantime. Then he put the matter from his mind and kept his thoughts on the duty that lay before him. It was nearly midnight before he returned to the palace, but instead of entering, he went down to the shore and hid behind a rock. He had scarcely done so when the girl came out of the sea and stretched out her arms towards his window. In an instant, the prince had seized her hand, and though she made a frightened struggle to reach the water, for she, in her turn, had had a spell laid upon her, he held her fast. "You are my own wife, and I shall never let you go," he said. But the words were hardly out of his mouth when he found that it was a hare that he was holding by the paw. Then the hare changed into a fish, and the fish into a bird, and the bird into a slimy, wriggling snake. This time, the prince's hand nearly opened of itself, but with a strong effort, he kept his fingers shut, and drawing his sword, cut off its head. When the spell was broken, and the girl stood before him as he had seen her first, the wreath upon her head, and the birds singing for joy. The very next morning, the stepmother arrived at the palace with an ointment that the old witch had given her to place upon her daughter's tongue, which would break the dove's spell if the rightful bride had really been drowned in the sea. If not, then it would be useless. The mother assured her that she had seen her stepdaughter sink, and that there was no fear that she would ever come up again. But to make all quite safe, the old woman might bewitch the girl. And so she did. After that, the wicked stepmother traveled all through the night to get to the palace as soon as possible, and made her way straight into her daughter's room. "I have got it! I have got it!" she cried triumphantly, and laid the ointment on her daughter's tongue. "Now what do you say?" she asked proudly. "Dirty creatures, dirty creatures," answered the daughter, and the mother wrung her hands and wept, as she knew that all her plans had failed. At this moment, the prince entered with his real wife. "You both deserved death," he said, "and if it were left to me, you should have it. But the princess has begged me to spare your lives, so you will be put into a ship and carried off to a desert island, where you will stay till you die." Then the ship was made ready, and the wicked woman and her daughter were placed in it, and it sailed away, and no more was heard of them. But the prince and his wife lived together long and happily, and ruled their people well. The Foolish Weaver, adapted from Thorpe's Yuletide Stories. Once a weaver, who was in want of work, took service with a certain farmer as a shepherd. The farmer, knowing that the man was very slow-witted, gave him most careful instructions as to everything that he was to do. Finally, he said, "If a wolf or any wild animal attempts to hurt the flock, you should pick up a big stone like this," suiting the action to the word, "and throw a few such at him, and he will be afraid and go away." The weaver said that he understood, and started with the flocks to the hillsides, where they grazed all day. By chance, in the afternoon, a leopard appeared, and the weaver instantly ran home as fast as he could to get the stones which the farmer had shown him, to throw at the creature. When he came back, all the flock were scattered or killed, and when the farmer heard the tale, he beat him soundly. "Were there no stones on the hillside that you should run back to get them, you senseless one?" he cried. "You are not fit to herd sheep. Today you shall stay at home and mind my old mother, who is sick. Perhaps you will be able to drive flies off her face, if you can't drive beasts away from sheep." So, the next day, the weaver was left at home to take care of the farmer's old, sick mother. Now, as she lay outside on a bed, it turned out that the flies became very troublesome, and the weaver looked round for something to drive them away with. And as he had been told to pick up the nearest stone to drive the beasts away from the flock, he thought he would this time show how cleverly he could obey orders. Accordingly, he seized the nearest stone, which was a big, heavy one, and dashed it at the flies. But, unhappily, he slew the poor old woman also. And then, being afraid of the wrath of the farmer, he fled, and was not seen again in that neighborhood. All that day, and all the next night, he walked. And at length he came to a village where a great many weavers lived together. "You are welcome," said they. "Eat and sleep, for tomorrow 6 of us start in search of fresh wool to weave, and we pray you to give us your company." "Willingly," answered the weaver. So the next morning, the 7 weavers set out to go to the village where they could buy what they wanted. On the way, they had to cross a ravine which lately had been full of water, but now was quite dry. The weavers, however, were accustomed to swim over this ravine. Therefore, regardless of the fact that this time it was dry, they stripped, and tying their clothes on their heads, they proceeded to swim across the dry sand and rocks that formed the bed of the ravine. Thus, they got to the other side without further damage than bruised knees and elbows, and as soon as they were over, one of them began to count the party to make sure that all were safe there. He counted all except himself, and then cried out that somebody was missing. This set each of them counting, but each made the same mistake of counting all except himself, so that they became certain that one of their party was missing. They ran up and down the bank of the ravine, wringing their hands in great distress and looking for signs of their lost comrade. There a farmer found them and asked what was the matter. "Alas," said one, "7 of us started from the other bank, and one must have been drowned on the crossing, as we can only find 6 remaining." The farmer eyed them a minute, and then, picking up his stick, he dealt each a sounding blow, counting as he did so, 1, 2, 3, and so on up to the 7. When the weavers found that there were 7 of them, they were overcome with gratitude to one whom they took for a magician, as he could thus make 7 out of an obvious 6. The Clever Cat. From the Pushto. Once upon a time, there lived an old man who dwelt with his son in a small hut on the edge of the plain. He was very old and had worked very hard, and when at last he was struck down by illness, he felt that he should never rise from his bed again. So, one day, he bade his wife summon their son when he came back from his journey to the nearest town, where he had been to buy bread. "Come hither, my son," said he. "I know myself well to be dying, and I have nothing to leave you but my falcon, my cat, and my greyhound. But if you make good use of them, you will never lack food. Be good to your mother, as you have been to me, and now farewell." Then he turned his face to the wall and died. There was great mourning in the hut for many days, but at length the son rose up, and calling to his greyhound, his cat, and his falcon, he left the house, saying that he would bring back something for dinner. Wandering over the plain, he noticed a troop of gazelles and pointed to his greyhound to give chase. The dog soon brought down a fine, fat beast, and slinging it over his shoulders, the young man turned homewards. On the way, however, he passed a pond, and as he approached, a cloud of birds flew into the air. Shaking his wrist, the falcon seated on it darted into the air and swooped down upon the quarry he had marked, which fell dead to the ground. The young man picked it up and put it in his pouch, and then went towards home again. Near the hut was a small barn in which he kept the produce of the little patch of corn, which grew close to the garden. Here, a rat ran out almost under his feet, followed by another and another. But quick as thought, the cat was upon them, and not one escaped her. When all the rats were killed, the young man left the barn. He took the path leading to the door of the hut, but stopped on feeling a hand laid on his shoulder. "Young man," said the ogre, for such was the stranger, "you have been a good son, and you deserve the piece of luck which has befallen you this day. Come with me to that shining lake yonder, and fear nothing." Wondering a little at what might be going to happen to him, the youth did as the ogre bade him, and when they reached the shore of the lake, the ogre turned and said to him, "Step into the water and shut your eyes. You will find yourself sinking slowly to the bottom. But take courage, all will go well. Only bring up as much silver as you can carry, and we will divide it between us." So the young man stepped bravely into the lake and felt himself sinking, till he reached firm ground at last. In front of him lay 4 heaps of silver, and in the midst of them a curious white, shining stone, marked over with strange characters, such as he had never seen before. He picked it up in order to examine it more closely, and as he held it, the stone spoke. "As long as you hold me, all your wishes will come true," it said. "But hide me in your turban, and then call to the ogre that you are ready to come up." In a few minutes, the young man stood again by the shores of the lake. "Well, where is the silver?" asked the ogre, who was awaiting him. "Ah, my father, how can I tell you? So bewildered was I, and so dazzled with the splendors of everything I saw, that I stood like a statue, unable to move. Then, hearing steps approaching, I got frightened and called to you. As you know, you are no better than the rest," cried the ogre, and turned away in a rage. When he was out of sight, the young man took the stone from his turban and looked at it. "I want the finest camel that can be found, and the most splendid garments," said he. "Shut your eyes, then," replied the stone, and he shut them. And when he opened them again, the camel that he had wished for was standing before him, while the festal robes of a desert prince hung from his shoulders. Mounting the camel, he whistled the falcon to his wrist, and, followed by his greyhound and his cat, he started homewards. His mother was sewing at her door when this magnificent stranger rode up, and filled with surprise, she bowed low before him. "Don't you know me, mother?" he said with a laugh, and on hearing his voice, the good woman nearly fell to the ground with astonishment. "How have you got that camel and those clothes?" asked she. "Can a son of mine have committed murder in order to possess them?" "Do not be afraid. They are quite honestly come by," answered the youth. "I will explain all by and by. But now you must go to the palace and tell the king I wish to marry his daughter." At these words, the mother thought her son had certainly gone mad, and stared blankly at him. The young man guessed what was in her heart, and replied with a smile, "Fear nothing. Promise all that he asks. It will be fulfilled somehow." So she went to the palace, where she found the king sitting in the hall of justice, listening to the petitions of his people. The woman waited until all had been heard, and the hall was empty, and then went up and knelt before the throne. "My son has sent me to ask for the hand of the princess," said she. The king looked at her and thought that she was mad. But instead of ordering his guards to turn her out, he answered gravely, "Before he can marry the princess, he must build me a palace of ice, which can be warmed with fires, and wherein the rarest singing birds can live." "It shall be done, Your Majesty," said she, and got up and left the hall. Her son was anxiously awaiting her outside the palace gates, dressed in the clothes that he wore every day. "Well, what have I got to do?" he asked impatiently, drawing his mother aside so that no one could overhear them. "Oh, something quite impossible, and I hope you will put the princess out of your head," she replied. "Well, but what is it?" persisted he. "Nothing but to build a palace of ice wherein fires can burn, that shall keep it so warm that the most delicate singing birds can live in it." "I thought it would be something much harder than that," exclaimed the young man. "I will see about it at once." And leaving his mother, he went into the country and took the stone from his turban. "I want a palace of ice that can be warmed with fires and filled with the rarest singing birds." "Shut your eyes, then," said the stone, and he shut them. And when he opened them again, there was the palace, more beautiful than anything he could have imagined, the fires throwing a soft pink glow over the ice. "It is fit even for the princess," thought he to himself. As soon as the king awoke next morning, he ran to the window, and there across the plain he beheld the palace. That young man must be a great wizard. He may be useful to me. And when the mother came again to tell him that his orders had been fulfilled, he received her with great honor, and bade her tell her son that the wedding was fixed for the following day. The princess was delighted with her new home, and with her husband also. And several days slipped happily by, spent in turning over all the beautiful things that the palace contained. But at length, the young man grew tired of always staying inside walls, and he told his wife that the next day he must leave her for a few hours and go out hunting. "You will not mind?" he asked. And she answered, as became a good wife, "Yes, of course I shall mind, but I will spend the day in planning out some new dresses. And then it will be so delightful when you come back, you know?" So the husband went off to hunt, with the falcon on his wrist, and the greyhound and the cat behind him. For the palace was so warm that even the cat did not mind living in it. No sooner had he gone than the ogre, who had been watching his chance for many days, knocked at the door of the palace. "I have just returned from a far country," he said, "and I have some of the largest and most brilliant stones in the world with me. The princess is known to love beautiful things. Perhaps she might like to buy some." Now the princess had been wondering for many days what trimming she should put on her dresses, so that they should outshine the dresses of the other ladies at the court balls. Nothing that she thought of seemed good enough. So, when the message was brought that the ogre and his wares were below, she at once ordered that he should be brought to her chamber. Oh, what beautiful stones he laid before her! What lovely rubies, and what rare pearls! No other lady would have jewels like those. Of that the princess was quite sure, but she cast down her eyes so that the ogre might not see how much she longed for them. "I fear they are too costly for me," she said carelessly, "and besides, I have hardly need of any more jewels just now. I have no particular wish to sell them myself," answered the ogre, with equal indifference. "But I have a necklace of shining stones which was left me by father, and one, the largest engraven with weird characters, is missing. I have heard that it is in your husband's possession, and if you can get me that stone, you shall have any of these jewels that you choose. But you will have to pretend that you want it for yourself, and above all, do not mention me, for he sets great store by it, and would never part with it to a stranger. Tomorrow I will return with some jewels, yet finer than those I have with me today. So, madam, farewell." Left alone, the princess began to think of many things, but chiefly as to whether she would persuade her husband to give her the stone or not. At one moment, she felt he had already bestowed so much upon her that it was a shame to ask for the only object he had kept back. No, it would be mean. She could not do it. But then, those diamonds and those string of pearls. After all, they had only been married a week, and the pleasure of giving it to her ought to be far greater than the pleasure of keeping it for himself. And she was sure it would be. Well, that evening, when the young man had supped off his favorite dishes, which the princess took care to have specially prepared for him, she sat down close beside him and began stroking his head. For some time she did not speak, but listened attentively to all the adventures that had befallen him that day. "But I was thinking of you all the time," said he at the end, "and wishing that I could bring you back something you would like. But alas, what is there that you do not possess already? How good of you not to forget me when you are in the midst of such dangers and hardships," answered she. "Yes, it is true I have many beautiful things, but if you want to give me a present, and tomorrow is my birthday, there is one thing that I wish for very much." "And what is that? Of course you shall have it directly," he asked eagerly. "It is that bright stone which fell out of the folds of your turban a few days ago," she answered, playing with his finger. "The little stone with all those funny marks upon it. I never saw any stone like it before." The young man did not answer at first. Then he said, slowly, "I have promised, and therefore I must perform. But will you swear never to part from it, and to keep it safely about you always? More I cannot tell you, but I beg you earnestly to take heed to this." The princess was a little startled by his manner, and began to be sorry that she had listened to the ogre, but she did not like to draw back, and pretended to be immensely delighted at her new toy, and kissed and thanked her husband for it. "After all, I needn't give it to the ogre," thought she, as she dropped off to sleep. Unluckily, the next morning, the young man went hunting again, and the ogre, who was watching, knew this, and did not come till much later than before. At the moment that he knocked at the door of the palace, the princess had tired of all her employments, and her attendants were at their wits' end. How to amuse her when a tall Negro dressed in scarlet came to announce that the ogre was below, and desired to know if the princess would speak to him. "Bring him hither at once!" cried she, springing up from her cushions, and forgetting all her resolves of the previous night. In another moment, she was bending with rapture over the glittering gems. "Have you got it?" asked the ogre in a whisper, for the princess's ladies were standing as near as they dared to catch a glimpse of the beautiful jewels. "Yes, here," she answered, slipping the stone from her sash and placing it among the rest. Then she raised her voice and began to talk quickly of the prices of the chains and necklaces, and after some bargaining, to deceive the attendants, she declared that she liked one string of pearls better than all the rest, and that the ogre might take away the other things, which were not half as valuable as he supposed. "As you please, madam," said he, bowing himself out of the palace. Soon after he had gone, a curious thing happened. The princess carelessly touched the wall of her room, which was wont to reflect the warm red light of the fire on the hearth, and found her hand quite wet. She turned round, and was it her fancy? Or did the fire burn more dimly than before? Hurriedly, she passed into the picture gallery, where pools of water showed here and there on the floor, and a cold chill ran through her whole body. At that instant, her frightened ladies came running down the stairs, crying, "Madam, Madam, what has happened? The palace is disappearing under our eyes. My husband will be home very soon," answered the princess, who, though nearly as much frightened as her ladies, felt that she must set them a good example. "Wait till then, and he will tell us what to do." So they waited, seated on the highest chairs they could find, wrapped in their warmest garments, and with piles of cushions under their feet, while the poor birds flew with numbed wings hither and thither, till they were so lucky as to discover an open window in some forgotten corner. Through this they vanished, and were seen no more. At last, when the princess and her ladies had been forced to leave the upper rooms, where the walls and floors had melted away, and to take refuge in the hall, the young man came home. He had ridden back along a winding road from which he did not see the palace till he was close upon it, and stood horrified at the spectacle before him. He knew in an instant that his wife must have betrayed his trust, but he would not reproach her, as she must be suffering enough already. Hurrying on, he sprang over all that was left of the palace walls, and the princess gave a cry of relief at the sight of him. "Come quickly," he said, "or you will be frozen to death." And a dreary little procession set out for the king's palace, the greyhound and the cat bringing up the rear. At the gates he left them, though his wife besought him to allow her to enter. "You have betrayed me and ruined me," he said sternly. "I go to seek my fortune alone." And without another word, he turned and left her, with his falcon on his wrist, and his greyhound and cat behind him. The young man walked a long way, inquiring of everyone he met whether they had seen his enemy the ogre. But nobody had. Then he bade his falcon fly up into the sky, up, up, and on, and try if his sharp eyes could discover the old thief. The bird had to go so high that he did not return for some hours, but he told his master that the ogre was lying asleep in a splendid palace in a far country on the shores of the sea. This was delightful news to the young man, who instantly bought some meat for the falcon, bidding him make a good meal. "Tomorrow," said he, "you will fly to the palace where the ogre lies, and while he is asleep, you will search all about him for a stone on which is engraved strange signs. this you will bring to me. In 3 days, I shall expect you back here." "Well, I must take the cat with me," answered the bird. The sun had not yet risen before the falcon soared high into the air, the cat seated on his back, with his paws tightly clasping the bird's neck. "You had better shut your eyes, or you may get giddy," said the bird. And the cat, who had never before been off the ground except to climb a tree, did as she was bid. All that day and all that night they flew, and in the morning they saw the ogre's palace lying beneath them. "Dear me," said the cat, opening her eyes for the first time. "That looks to me very like a rat city down there. Let us go down to it. They may be able to help us." So they alighted in some bushes in the heart of the rat city. The falcon remained where he was, but the cat lay down outside the principal gate, causing terrible excitement among the rats. At length, seeing she did not move, one, bolder than the rest, put its head out of an upper window of the castle and said in a trembling voice, "Why have you come here? What do you want? If it is anything in our power, tell us, and we will do it." "If you would have let me speak to you before, I would have told you that I come as a friend," replied the cat, "and I shall be greatly obliged if you would send 4 of the strongest and cunningest among you to do me a service." "Oh, we shall be delighted," answered the rat, much relieved. "But if you will inform me what it is you wish them to do, I shall be better able to judge who is most fitted for the post." "I thank you," said the cat. "Well, what they have to do is this. Tonight, they must burrow under the walls of the castle and go up to the room where an ogre lies asleep. Somewhere about him, he has hidden a stone on which are engraved strange signs. When they have found it, they must take it from him without his waking and bring it to me. Your orders shall be obeyed," replied the rat. And he went out to give his instructions. About midnight, the cat, who was still sleeping before the gate, was awakened by some water flung at her by the head rat, who could not make up his mind to open the doors. "Here is the stone you wanted," said he, when the cat started up with a loud mew. "If you will hold up your paws, I will drop it down." And so he did. "And now, farewell," continued the rat. "You have a long way to go, and will do well to start before daybreak." "Your counsel is good," replied the cat, smiling to itself, and putting the stone in her mouth, she went off to seek the falcon. Now, all this time, neither the cat nor the falcon had had any food, and the falcon soon got tired carrying such a heavy burden. When night arrived, he declared he could go no further, but would spend it on the banks of a river. "And it is my turn to take care of the stone," said he, "or it will seem as if you had done everything and I nothing." "No, I got it, and I will keep it," answered the cat, who was tired and cross, and they began a fine quarrel. But unluckily, in the midst of it, the cat raised her voice, and the stone fell into the ear of a big fish which happened to be swimming by. And though both the cat and the falcon sprang into the water after it, they were too late. Half drowned and more than half choked, the two faithful servants scrambled back to land again. The falcon flew to a tree and spread his wings in the sun to dry, but the cat, after giving herself a good shake, began to scratch up the sandy banks and to throw the bits into the stream. "What are you doing that for?" asked a little fish. "Do you know that you are making the water quite muddy?" "That doesn't matter at all to me," answered the cat. "I am going to fill up all the river so that the fishes may die." "Bah, that is very unkind, as we have never done you any harm," replied the fish. "Why are you so angry with us?" "Because one of you has got a stone of mine, a stone with strange signs upon it, which dropped into the water. If you will promise to get it back for me, why, perhaps I will leave your river alone." "I will certainly try," answered the fish in a great hurry. "But you must have a little patience, as it may not be an easy task." And in an instant, his scales might be seen flashing quickly along. The fish swam as fast as he could to the sea, which was not far distant, and calling together all his relations who lived in the neighborhood, he told them of the terrible danger which threatened the dwellers in the river. "None of us has got it," said the fishes, shaking their heads. "But in the bay yonder, there is a tunny who, although he is old, always goes everywhere. He will be able to tell you about it, if anyone can." Sumaso. So the little fish swam to the tunny, and again related his story. "Why, I was up that river only a few hours ago," cried the tunny. "And as I was coming back, something fell into my ear, and there it is still. For I went to sleep, when I got home and forgot all about it. Perhaps it may be what you want." And stretching up his tail, he whisked out the stone. "Yes, I think that must be it," said the fish with joy. And taking the stone in his mouth, he carried it to the place where the cat was waiting for him. "I am much obliged to you," said the cat, as the fish laid the stone on the sand. "And to reward you, I will let your river alone." And she mounted the falcon's back, and they flew to their master. Ah, how glad he was to see them again, with the magic stone in their possession. In a moment, he had wished for a palace, but this time it was of green marble. And then he wished for the princess and her ladies to occupy it, and there they lived for many years. And when the old king died, the princess's husband reigned in his stead. The Story of Manus, adapted from Contes Berberes. Far away over the sea of the west, there reigned a king who had 2 sons, and the name of the one was Oireal, and the name of the other was Iarlaid. When the boys were still children, their father and mother died, and a great council was held, and a man was chosen from among them who would rule the kingdom till the boys were old enough to rule it themselves. The years passed on, and by another council was held, and it was agreed that the king's sons were now of an age to take the power which rightly belonged to them. So the youths were bidden to appear before the council, and Oireal the elder was smaller and weaker than his brother. I like not to leave the deer on the hill and the fish in the rivers, and sit in judgment on my people, said Oireal, when he had listened to the words of the chief of the council. And the chief waxed angry and answered quickly, "Not one clod of earth shall ever be yours, if this day you do not take on yourself the vows that were taken by the king your father." Then spake Iarlaid the younger, and he said, "Let 1/2 be yours, and the other give to me. Then you will have fewer people to rule over." "Yes, I will do that," answered Oireal. After this, 1/2 of the men of the land of Lochlan did homage to Oireal, and the other half to Iarlaid. And they governed their kingdoms as they would, and in a few years they became grown men with beards on their chins. And Iarlaid married the daughter of the king of Greece, and Oireal the daughter of the king of Orkney. The next year, sons were born to Oireal and Iarlaid, and the son of Oireal was big and strong, but the son of Iarlaid was little and weak, and each had 6 foster brothers who went everywhere with the princes. One day, Manus, son of Oireal, and his cousin, the son of Iarlaid, called to their foster brothers and bade them come and play a game at shinny in the great field near the school, where they were taught all that princes and nobles should know. Long they played, and swiftly did the ball pass from one to another, when Manus drove the ball at his cousin, the son of Iarlaid. The boy, who was not used to be roughly handled, even in jest, cried out that he was sorely hurt, and went home with his foster brothers and told his tale to his mother. The wife of Iarlaid grew white and angry as she listened, and thrusting her son aside, sought the council hall where Iarlaid was sitting. "Manus has driven a ball at my son, and fain would have slain him," said she. "Let an end be put to him, and his ill deeds. But Iarlaid answered, Nay, I will not slay the son of my brother. And he shall not slay my son, said the queen, and calling to her chamberlain, she ordered him to lead the prince to the 4 brown boundaries of the world, and to leave him there with a wise man who would care for him and let no harm befall him. And the wise man set the boy on the top of a hill where the sun always shone, and he could see every man, but no man could see him. Then she summoned Manus to the castle, and for a whole year she kept him fast, and his own mother could not get speech of him. But in the end, when the wife of Oirial fell sick, Manus fled from the tower, which was his prison, and stole back to his own home. For a few years he stayed there in peace, and then the wife of Iarlaid, his uncle, sent for him. It is time that you were married, she said, when she saw that Manus had grown tall and strong like unto Iarlaid. Tall and strong you are, and comely of face. I know a bride that will suit you well, and that is the daughter of the mighty Earl of Finghaid, that does homage for his lands to me. I myself will go with a great following to his house, and you shall go with me. Thus it was done. And though the earl's wife was eager to keep her daughter with her yet a while, she was fain to yield, as the wife of Iarlaid vowed that not a rood of land should the earl have, unless he did her bidding. But if he would give his daughter to Manus, she would bestow on him the 3rd part of her own kingdom, with much treasure beside. This she did, not from love to Manus, but because she wished to destroy him. So they were married, and rode back with the wife of Iarlaid to her own palace. And that night, while he was sleeping, there came a wise man, who was his father's friend, and awoke him, saying, Danger lies very close to you, Manus, son of Oirial. You hold yourself favored, because you have as a bride the daughter of a mighty earl. But do you know what bride the wife of Iarlaid sought for her own son? It was no worldly wife she found for him, but the swift March wind, and never can you prevail against her. Is it thus? Answered Manu. And at the first streak of dawn, he went to the chamber where the queen lay in the midst of her maidens. I have come, he said, for the 3rd part of the kingdom, and for the treasure which you promised me. But the wife of Iarlaid laughed as she heard him. Not a clod shall you have here, spake she. You must go to the old Bergen for that. Mayhap under its stones and rough mountains you may find a treasure. Then give me your son's 6 foster brothers, as well as my own, answered he. And the queen gave them to him, and they set out for Old Bergen. A year passed by, and found them still in that wild land, hunting the reindeer, and digging pits for the mountain sheep to fall into. For a time, Manus and his companions lived merrily, but at length Manus grew weary of the strange country, and they all took ship for the land of Lachlan. The wind was fierce and cold, and long was the voyage. But one spring day they sailed into the harbor that lay beneath the castle of Ayarlaid. The queen looked from her window and beheld him mounting the hill, with the 12 foster brothers behind him. Then she said to her husband, "Manus has returned with his 12 foster brothers. Would that I could put an end to him and his murdering and his slaying." "That were a great pity," answered Ayarlaid, "and it is not I that will do it." "If you will not do it, I will," said she. And she called the 12 foster brothers and made them vow fealty to herself. So Manus was left with no man, and sorrowful was he when he returned alone to Old Bergen. It was late when his foot touched the shore, and took the path towards the forest. On his way there met him a man in a red tunic. "Is it you, Manus? Come back again?" asked he. "It is I," answered Manus. "Alone have I returned from the land of Lachlan." The man eyed him silently for a moment, and then he said, "I dreamed that you were girt with a sword, and became king of Lachlan." But Manus answered, "I have no sword, and my bow is broken." "I will give you a new sword if you will make me a promise," said the man once more. "To be sure, I will make it, if ever I am king," answered Manus. "But speak, and tell me what promise I am to make." "I was your grandfather's armorer," replied the man, "and I wish to be your armorer also." "That I will promise readily," said Manus, and followed the man into his house, which was at a little distance. But the house was not like other houses, for the walls of every room were hung so thick with arms that you could not see the boards. "Choose what you will," said the man, and Manus unhooked a sword and tried it across his knee, and it broke, and so did the next, and the next. "Leave off breaking the swords," cried the man, "and look at this old sword and helmet and tunic that I wore in the wars of your grandfather. Perhaps you may find them of stouter steel." And Manus bent the sword thrice across his knee, but he could not break it. So he girded it to his side and put on the old helmet. As he fastened the strap, his eye fell on a cloth flapping outside the window. "What cloth is that?" asked he. "It is a cloth that was woven by the little people of the forest," said the man. "And when you are hungry, it will give you food and drink. And if you meet a foe, he will not hurt you, but will stoop and kiss the back of your hand in token of submission. Take it and use it well." Manus gladly wrapped the shawl round his arm and was leaving the house when he heard the rattling of a chain blown by the wind. "What chain is that?" asked he. "The creature who has that chain round his neck need not fear 100 enemies," answered the armorer. And Manus wound it round him and passed on into the forest. Suddenly, there sprang out from the bushes 2 lions, and a lion cub with them. The fierce beasts bounded towards him, roaring loudly, and would fain have eaten him. But quickly Manus stooped and spread the cloth upon the ground. At that the lions stopped, and bowing their great heads, kissed the back of his wrist, and went their ways. But the cub rolled itself up in the cloth, so Manus picked them both up and carried them with him to Old Bergen. Another year went by, and then he took the lion cub and set forth to the land of Lochlan. And the wife of Iarlaid came to meet him, and a brown dog, small but full of courage, came with her. When the dog beheld the lion cub, he rushed towards him, thinking to eat him. But the cub caught the dog by the neck and shook him, and he was dead. And the wife of Iarlaid mourned him sore, and her wrath was kindled. And many times she tried to slay Manus and his cub, but she could not. And at last they two went back to Old Bergen, and the 12 foster brothers went also. "Let them go," said the wife of Iarlaid when she heard of it. "My brother, the red Gruagach, will take the head off Manus as well in Old Bergen as elsewhere." Now these words were carried by a messenger to the wife of Oireal, and she made haste and sent a ship to Old Bergen to bear away her son before the red Gruagach should take the head off him. And in the ship was a pilot. But the wife of Iarlaid made a thick fog to cover the face of the sea, and the rowers could not row, lest they should drive the ship on to a rock. And when night came, the lion cub, whose eyes were bright and keen, stole up to Manus, and Manus got on his back, and the lion cub sprang ashore and bade Manus rest on the rock and wait for him. So Manus slept, and by a voice sounded in his ears, saying, "Arise." And he saw a ship in the water beneath him, and in the ship sat the lion cub in the shape of the pilot. Then they sailed away through the fog, and none saw them, and they reached the land of Lochlan, and the lion cub, with the chain round his neck, sprang from the ship, and Manus followed after. And the lion cub killed all the men that guarded the castle, and Iarlaid and his wife also, so that in the end Manus, son of Oireal, was crowned King of Lochlin. Pinkel the Thief, shortened from West Highland Tales. Long, long ago, there lived a widow who had 3 sons. The 2 eldest were grown up, and though they were known to be idle fellows, some of the neighbors had given them work to do on account of the respect in which their mother was held. But at the time this story begins, they had both been so careless and idle that their masters declared they would keep them no longer. So home they went to their mother and youngest brother, of whom they thought little, because he made himself useful about the house, and looked after the hens, and milked the cow. Pinkel, they called him in scorn, and by, Pinkel became his name throughout the village. The 2 young men thought it was much nicer to live at home and be idle than to be obliged to do a quantity of disagreeable things they did not like, and they would have stayed by the fire till the end of their lives, had not the widow lost patience with them, and said that since they would not look for work at home, they must seek it elsewhere, for she would not have them under her roof any longer. But she repented bitterly of her words when Pinkel told her that he too was old enough to go out into the world, and that when he had made a fortune, he would send for his mother to keep house for him. The widow wept many tears at parting from her youngest son, but as she saw that his heart was set upon going with his brothers, she did not try to keep him. So the young men started off one morning in high spirits, never doubting that work such as they might be willing to do would be had for the asking. As soon as their little store of money was spent, but a very few days of wandering opened their eyes. Nobody seemed to want them, or, if they did, the young men declared that they were not able to undertake all that the farmers or millers or woodcutters required of them. The youngest brother, who was wiser, would gladly have done some of the work that the others refused, but he was small and slight, and no one thought of offering him any. Therefore, they went from one place to another, living only on the fruit and nuts they could find in the woods, and getting hungrier every day. One night, after they had been walking for many hours and were very tired, they came to a large lake with an island in the middle of it. From the island streamed a strong light, by which they could see everything almost as clearly as if the sun had been shining, and they perceived that, lying half hidden in the rushes, was a boat. "Let us take it and row over to the island, where there must be a house," said the eldest brother, "and perhaps they will give us food and shelter." And they all got in and rowed across in the direction of the light. As they drew near the island, they saw that it came from a golden lantern hanging over the door of a hut, while sweet, tinkling music proceeded from some bells attached to the golden horns of a goat which was feeding near the cottage. The young men's hearts rejoiced as they thought that at last they would be able to rest their weary limbs and they entered the hut, but were amazed to see an ugly old woman inside, wrapped in a cloak of gold, which lighted up the whole house. They looked at each other uneasily as she came forward with her daughter, as they knew by the cloak that this was a famous witch. "What do you want?" asked she, at the same time signing to her daughter to stir the large pot on the fire. "We are tired and hungry, and would fain have shelter for the night," answered the eldest brother. "You cannot get it here," said the witch, "but you will find both food and shelter in the palace on the other side of the lake. Take your boat and go. But leave this boy with me. I can find work for him, though something tells me he is quick and cunning, and will do me ill. What harm can a poor boy like me do a great troll like you?" answered Pinkel. "Let me go, I pray you, with my brothers. I will promise never to hurt you." And at last the witch let him go, and he followed his brothers to the boat. The way was further than they thought, and it was morning before they reached the palace. Now, at last, their luck seemed to have turned, for while the two eldest were given places in the king's stables, Pinkel was taken as page to the little prince. He was a clever and amusing boy who saw everything that passed under his eyes, and the king noticed this and often employed him in his own service, which made his brothers very jealous. Things went on this way for some time, and Pinkel every day rose in the royal favor. At length, the envy of his brothers became so great that they could bear it no longer, and consulted together how best they might ruin his credit with the king. They did not wish to kill him, though perhaps they would not have been sorry if they had heard he was dead, but merely wished to remind him that he was, after all, only a child, not half so old and wise as they. Their opportunity soon came. It happened to be the king's custom to visit his stables once a week, so that he might see that his horses were being properly cared for. The next time he entered the stables, the two brothers managed to be in the way, and when the king praised the beautiful satin skins of the horses under their charge, and remarked how different was their condition, when his grooms had first come across the lake, the young men at once began to speak of the wonderful light which sprang from the lantern over the hut. The king, who had a passion for collection, all the rarest things he could find, fell into the trap directly, and inquired where he could get this marvelous lantern. "Send Pinkel for it, sire," said they. "It belongs to an old witch who no doubt came by it in some evil way. But Pinkel has a smooth tongue, and he can get the better of any woman, old or young." "Then bid him go this very night," cried the king. "And if he brings me the lantern, I will make him one of the chief men about my person." Pinkel was much pleased at the thought of his adventure, and without more ado, he borrowed a little boat which lay moored to the shore and rowed over to the island at once. It was late by the time he arrived, and almost dark, but he knew by the savory smell that reached him that the witch was cooking her supper. So he climbed softly onto the roof and, peering, watched till the old woman's back was turned, when he quickly drew a handful of salt from his pocket and threw it into the pot. Scarcely had he done this when the witch called her daughter and bade her lift the pot off the fire and put the stew into a dish, as it had been cooking quite long enough, and she was hungry. But no sooner had she tasted it than she put her spoon down and declared that her daughter must have been meddling with it, for it was impossible to eat anything that was all made of salt. Go down to the spring in the valley and get some fresh water, that I may prepare a fresh supper, cried she, for I feel half starved. But, mother, answered the girl, how can I find the well in this darkness? For you know that the lantern's rays shed no light down there. Well then, take the lantern with you, answered the witch, for supper I must have, and there is no water that is nearer. So the girl took her pail in one hand and the golden lantern in the other, and hastened away to the well, followed by Pinkel, who took care to keep out of the way of the rays. When at last she stooped to fill her pail at the well, Pinkel pushed her into it, and snatching up the lantern, hurried back to his boat and rowed off from the shore. He was already a long distance from the island when the witch, who wondered what had become of her daughter, went to the door to look for her. Close around the hut was thick darkness. But what was that bobbing light that streamed across the water? The witch's heart sank as all at once it flashed upon her what had happened. "Is that you, Pinkel?" cried she. And the youth answered, "Yes, dear mother, it is I." "And are you not a knave for robbing me?" said she. "Truly, dear mother, I am," replied Pinkel, rowing faster than ever, for he was half afraid that the witch might come after him. But she had no power on the water, and turned angrily into the hut, muttering to herself all the while, "Take care, take care. A second time you will not escape so easily." The sun had not yet risen when Pinkel returned to the palace, and entering the king's chamber, he held up the lantern so that its rays might fall upon the bed. In an instant, the king awoke, and seeing the golden lantern shedding its light upon him, he sprang up and embraced Pinkel with joy. "O cunning one," cried he, "what treasure hast thou brought me?" And calling for his attendants, he ordered that rooms next his own should be prepared for Pinkel, and that the youth might enter his presence at any hour. And besides this, he was to have a seat on the council. It may easily be guessed that all this made the brothers more envious than they were before, and they cast about in their minds afresh how best they might destroy him. At length, they remembered the goat with golden horns and the bells, and they rejoiced. "Fortka," said they, "this time the old woman will be on the watch, and let him be as clever as he likes. The bells on the horns are sure to warn her." So when, as before, the king came down to the stables and praised the cleverness of their brother, the young men told him of that other marvel possessed by the witch, the goat with the golden horns. From this moment, the king never closed his eyes at night for longing after this wonderful creature. He understood something of the danger that there might be in trying to steal it, now that the witch's suspicions were aroused. And he spent hours in making plans for outwitting her. But somehow, he never could think of anything that would do. And at last, as the brothers had foreseen, he sent for Pinkel. "I hear," he said, "that the old witch on the island has a goat with golden horns, from which hang bells that tinkle the sweetest music. That goat I must have, but tell me, how am I to get it? I would give the third part of my kingdom to anyone who would bring it to me." "I will fetch it myself," answered Pinkel. This time, it was easier for Pinkel to approach the island unseen, as there was no eaten lantern to thrown its beams over the water. But, on the other hand, the goat slept inside the hut, and would therefore have to be taken from under the very eyes of the old woman. How was he to do it? All the way across the lake, he thought and thought, till at length a plan came into his head, which seemed as if it might do, though he knew it would be very difficult to carry out. The first thing he did when he reached the shore was to look about for a piece of wood, and when he had found it, he hid himself close to the hut, till it grew quite dark, and near the hour when the witch and her daughter went to bed. Then he crept up and fixed the wood under the door, which opened outwards in such a manner that the more you tried to shut it, the more firmly it stuck. And this was what happened when the girl went as usual to bolt the door and make all fast for the night. "What are you doing?" asked the witch, as her daughter kept tugging at the handle. "There is something the matter with the door. It won't shut," answered she. "Well, leave it alone. There is nobody to hurt us," said the witch, who was very sleepy. And the girl did as she was bid, and went to bed. Very soon, they both might have been heard snoring, and Pinkel knew that his time was come. Slipping off his shoes, he stole into the hut on tiptoe, and taking from his pocket some food of which the goat was particularly fond, he laid it under his nose. Then, while the animal was eating it, he stuffed each golden bell with wool, which he had also brought with him, stopping every minute to listen, lest the witch should awaken, and he should find himself changed into some dreadful bird or beast. But the snoring still continued, and he went on with his work as quickly as he could. When the last bell was done, he drew another handful of food out of his pocket and held it out to the goat, which instantly rose to its feet and followed Pinkel, who backed slowly to the door, and directly he got outside, he seized the goat in his arms and ran down to the place where he had moored his boat. As soon as he had reached the middle of the lake, Pinkel took the wool out of the bells, which began to tinkle loudly. Their sound awoke the witch, who cried out as before, "Is that you, Pinkel?" "Yes, dear mother, it is I," said Pinkel. "Have you stolen my golden goat?" asked she. "Yes, dear mother, I have," answered Pinkel. "Are you not a knave, Pinkel?" "Yes, dear mother, I am," he replied. And the old witch shouted in a rage, "Ah, beware how you come hither again, for next time you shall not escape me." But Pinkel laughed and rode on. The king was so delighted with the goat that he always kept it by his side, night and day. And as he had promised, Pinkel was made ruler over the third part of the kingdom. As may be supposed, the brothers were more furious than ever, and grew quite thin with rage. "How can we get rid of him?" said one to the other. And at length they remembered the golden cloak. "He will need to be clever if he is to steal that," they cried with a chuckle. And when Mad the king came to see his horses, they began to speak of Pinkel and his marvelous cunning, and how he had contrived to steal the lantern and the goat, which nobody else would have been able to do. But as he was there, it is a pity he could not have brought away the golden cloak, added they. "The golden cloak. What is that?" asked the king. And the young men described its beauties in such glowing words that the king declared he should never know a day's happiness till he had wrapped the cloak round his own shoulders. "And," added he, "the man who brings it to me shall wed my daughter, and shall inherit my throne." "None can get it save Pinkel," said they, for they did not imagine that the witch, after 2 warnings, could allow their brother to escape a 3rd time. So Pinkel was sent for, and with a glad heart he set out. He passed many hours inventing first one plan and then another, till he had a scheme ready, which he thought might prove successful. Thrusting a large bag inside his coat, he pushed off from the shore, taking care this time to reach the island in daylight. Having made his boat fast to a tree, he walked up to the hut, hanging his head, and putting on a face that was both sorrowful and ashamed. "Is that you, Pinkel?" asked the witch when she saw him, her eyes gleaming savagely. "Yes, dear mother, it is I," answered Pinkel. "So you have dared, after all you have done, to put yourself in my power," cried she. "Well, you shan't escape me this time." And she took down a large knife and began to sharpen it. "Oh, dear mother, spare me," shrieked Pinkel, falling on his knees and looking wildly about him. "Spare you indeed, you thief. Where are my lantern and my goat? No, not. There is only one fate for robbers." And she brandished the knife in the air so that it glittered in the firelight. "Then, if I must die," said Pinkel, who by this time was getting really rather frightened, "let me at least choose the manner of my death. I am very hungry, for I have had nothing to eat all day. Put some poison, if you like, into the porridge, but at least let me have a good meal before I die." "That is not a bad idea," answered the woman. "As long as you do die, it is all one to me." And ladling out a large bowl of porridge, she stirred some poisonous herbs into it and set about work that had to be done. Then Pinkel hastily poured all the contents of the bowl into his bag and made a great noise with his spoon, as if he was scraping up the last morsel. "Poisoned or not, the porridge is excellent. I have eaten it, every scrap. Do give me some more," said Pinkel, turning towards her. "Well, you have a fine appetite, young man," answered the witch. "However, it is the last time you will ever eat it, so I will give you another bowlful." And rubbing in the poisonous herbs, she poured him out half of what remained, and then went to the window to call her cat. In an instant, Pinkel again emptied the porridge into the bag, and the next minute he rolled on the floor, twisting himself about as if in agony, uttering loud groans the while. Suddenly, he grew silent and lay still. "Ah, I thought a second dose of that poison would be too much for you," said the witch, looking at him. "I warned you what would happen if you came back. I wish that all thieves were as dead as you. But why does not my lazy girl bring the wood I sent her for? It will soon be too dark for her to find her way. I suppose I must go and search for her. What a trouble girls are." And she went to the door to watch if there were any signs of her daughter, but nothing could be seen of her, and heavy rain was falling. "It is no night for my cloak," she muttered. "It would be covered with mud by the time I got back." So she took it off her shoulders and hung it carefully up in a cupboard in the room. After that, she put on her clogs and started to seek her daughter. Directly the last sound of the clogs had ceased, Pinkel jumped up and took down the cloak and rode off as fast as he could. He had not gone far when a puff of wind unfolded the cloak, and its brightness shed gleams across the water. The witch, who was just entering the forest, turned round at that moment and saw the golden rays. She forgot all about her daughter and ran down to the shore, screaming with rage at being outwitted a third time. "Is that you, Pinkel?" cried she. "Yes, dear mother, it is I." "Have you taken my gold cloak?" "Yes, dear mother, I have." "Are you not a great knave?" "Yes, truly, dear mother, I am." And so indeed he was, but all the same, he carried the cloak to the king's palace, and in return, he received the hand of the king's daughter in marriage. People said that it was the bride who ought to have worn the cloak at her wedding feast. But the king was so pleased with it that he would not part from it, and to the end of his life was never seen without it. After his death, Pinkel became king, and let up hope that he gave up his bad and thievish ways and ruled his subjects well. As for his brothers, he did not punish them, but left them in the stables, where they grumbled all day long. The Adventures of a Jackal. Thorpe's Yuletide Stories. In a country which is full of wild beasts of all sorts, there once lived a jackal and a hedgehog, and unlike though they were, the two animals made great friends and were often seen in each other's company. One afternoon, they were walking along a road together, when the jackal, who was the taller of the two, exclaimed, "Oh, there is a barn full of corn. Let us go and eat some." "Yes, do let us," answered the hedgehog. So they went to the barn and ate till they could eat no more. Then the jackal put on his shoes, which he had taken off so as to make no noise, and they returned to the high road. After they had gone some way, they met a panther, who stopped and, bowing politely, said, "Excuse my speaking to you, but I cannot help admiring those shoes of yours. Do you mind telling me who made them?" "Yes, I think they are rather nice," answered the jackal. "I made them myself, though." "Could you make me a pair like them?" asked the panther eagerly. "I would do my best, of course," replied the jackal. "But you must kill me a cow, and when we have eaten the flesh, I will take the skin and make your shoes out of it." So the panther prowled about until he saw a fine cow grazing apart from the rest of the herd. He killed it instantly, and then gave a cry to the jackal and hedgehog to come to the place where he was. They soon skinned the dead beasts and spread its skin out to dry, after which they had a grand feast before they curled themselves up for the night and slept soundly. Next morning, the jackal got up early and set to work upon the shoes, while the panther sat by and looked on with delight. At last they were finished, and the jackal arose and stretched himself. "Now go and lay them in the sun out there," said he. "In a couple of hours they will be ready to put on, but do not attempt to wear them before, or you will feel them most uncomfortable. But I see the sun is high in the heavens, and we must be continuing our journey." The panther, who always believed what everybody told him, did exactly as he was bid, and in 2 hours' time began to fasten on the shoes. They certainly set off his paws wonderfully, and he stretched out his forepaws and looked at them with pride. But when he tried to walk, that was another story. They were so stiff and hard that he nearly shrieked every step he took. And at last he sank down where he was and actually began to cry. After some time, some little partridges, who were hopping about, heard the poor panther's groans and went up to see what was the matter. He had never tried to make his dinner off them, and they had always been quite friendly. "You seem in pain," said one of them, fluttering close to him. "Can we help you?" "Oh, it is the jackal. He made me these shoes. They are so hard and tight that they hurt my feet, and I cannot manage to kick them off. Lie still, and we will soften them," answered the kind little partridge, and calling to his brothers, they all flew to the nearest spring and carried water in their beaks, which they poured over the shoes. This they did till the hard leather grew soft, and the panther was able to slip his feet out of them. "Oh, thank you, he cried, skipping round with joy. "I feel a different creature. Now I will go after the jackal and pay him my debts." And he bounded away into the forest. But the jackal had been very cunning, and had trotted backwards and forwards, and in and out, so that it was very difficult to know which track he had really followed. At length, however, the panther caught sight of his enemy, at the same moment that the jackal had caught sight of him. The panther gave a loud roar and sprang forward, but the jackal was too quick for him and plunged into a dense thicket where the panther could not follow. Disgusted with his failure, but more angry than ever, the panther lay down for a while to consider what he should do next. And as he was thinking, an old man came by. "Oh, Father, tell me how I can repay the jackal for the way he has served me." And without more ado, he told his story. "If you take my advice," answered the old man, "you will kill a cow and invite all the jackals in the forest to the feast. Watch them carefully while they are eating, and you will see that most of them keep their eyes on their food. But if one of them glances at you, you will know that is the traitor." The panther, whose manners were always good, thanked the old man and followed his counsel. The cow was killed, and the partridges flew about with invitations to the jackals, who gathered in large numbers to the feast. The wicked jackal came amongst them, but as the panther had only seen him once, he could not distinguish him from the rest. However, they all took their places on wooden seats placed round the dead cow, which was laid across the boughs of a fallen tree, and began their dinner, each jackal fixing his eyes greedily on the piece of meat before him. Only one of them seemed uneasy, and every now and then glanced in the direction of his host. This the panther noticed, and suddenly made a bound at the culprit and seized his tail. But again, the jackal was too quick for him, and catching up a knife, he cut off his tail and darted into the forest, followed by all the rest of the party. And before the panther had recovered from his surprise, he found himself alone. "What am I to do now?" he asked the old man, who soon came back to see how things had turned out. "It is very unfortunate, certainly," answered he, "but I think I know where you can find him. There is a melon garden about 2 miles from here, and as jackals are very fond of melons, they are nearly sure to have gone there to feed. If you see a tailless jackal, you will know that he is the one you want." So the panther thanked him and went his way. Now the jackal had guessed what advice the old man would give his enemy. And so, while his friends were greedily eating the ripest melons in the sunniest corner of the garden, he stole behind them and tied their tails together. He had only just finished when his ears caught the sound of breaking branches, and he cried, "Quick! Quick! Here comes the master of the garden!" And the jackals sprang up and ran away in all directions, leaving their tails behind them. And how was the panther to know which was his enemy? "They none of them had any tails," he said sadly to the old man, "and I am tired of hunting them. I shall leave them alone and go and catch something for supper." Of course, the hedgehog had not been able to take part in any of these adventures, but as soon as all danger was over, the jackal went to look for his friend, whom he was lucky enough to find at home. "Ah, there you are," he said gaily. "I have lost my tail since I saw you last, and other people have lost theirs too. But that is no matter. I am hungry, so come with me to the shepherd who is sitting over there, and we will ask him to sell us one of his sheep." "Yes, that is a good plan," answered the hedgehog, and he walked as fast as his little legs would go to keep up with the jackal. When they reached the shepherd, the jackal pulled out his purse from under his foreleg and made his bargain. "Only wait till tomorrow," said the shepherd, "and I will give you the biggest sheep you ever saw." but he always feeds at some distance from the rest of the flock, and it would take me a long time to catch him. Well, it is very tiresome, but I suppose I must wait," replied the jackal, and he and the hedgehog looked about for a nice dry cave in which to make themselves comfortable for the night. But after they had gone, the shepherd killed one of his sheep and stripped off his skin, which he sewed tightly round a greyhound he had with him, and put a cord round its neck. Then he lay down and went to sleep. Very, very early, before the sun was properly up, the jackal and the hedgehog were pulling at the shepherd's cloak. "Wake up," they said, "and give us that sheep. We have had nothing to eat all night and are very hungry." The shepherd yawned and rubbed his eyes. "He is tied up to that tree. Go and take him." So they went to the tree and unfastened the cord, and turned to go back to the cave where they had slept, dragging the greyhound after them. When they reached the cave, the jackal said to the hedgehog, "Before I kill him, let me see whether he is fat or thin." And he stood a little way back, so that he might the better examine the animal. After looking at him, with his head on one side, for a minute or two, he nodded gravely. "He is quite fat enough. He is a good sheep." But the hedgehog, who sometimes showed more cunning than anyone would have guessed, answered, "My friend, you are talking nonsense. The wool is indeed a sheep's wool, but the paws of my uncle, the greyhound, peep out from underneath." "He is a sheep," repeated the jackal, who did not like to think anyone cleverer than himself. "Hold the cord while I look at him," answered the hedgehog. Very unwillingly, the jackal held the rope, while the hedgehog walked slowly round the greyhound till he reached the jackal again. He knew quite well by the paws and tail that it was a greyhound and not a sheep, that the shepherd had sold them, and as he could not tell what turn affairs might take, he resolved to get out of the way. "Oh, yes, you are right," he said to the jackal, "but I never can eat till I have first drunk. I will just go and quench my thirst from that spring at the edge of the wood, and then I shall be ready for breakfast." "Don't be long, then," called the jackal, as the hedgehog hurried off at his best pace, and he lay down under a rock to wait for him. More than an hour passed by, and the hedgehog had had plenty of time to go to the spring and back. And still, there was no sign of him. And this was very natural, as he had hidden himself in some long grass under a tree. At length, the jackal guessed that for some reason his friend had run away, and determined to wait for his breakfast no longer. So he went up to the place where the greyhound had been tethered and untied the rope. But just as he was about to spring on his back and give him a deadly bite. The jackal heard a low growl, which never proceeded from the throat of any sheep. Like a flash of lightning, the jackal threw down the cord and was flying across the plain. But though his legs were long, the greyhound's legs were longer still, and he soon came up with his prey. The jackal turned to fight, but he was no match for the greyhound, and in a few minutes he was lying dead on the ground, while the greyhound was trotting peacefully back to the shepherd. The Adventures of the Jackal's Eldest Son, Nouveau Conte Berbere, par René Basset. Now, though the jackal was dead, he had left 2 sons behind him, every whit as cunning and tricky as their father. The elder of the 2 was a fine, handsome creature who had a pleasant manner and made many friends. The animal he saw most of was a hyena, and one day, when they were taking a walk together, they picked up a beautiful green cloak, which had evidently been dropped by someone riding across the plain on a camel. Of course, each wanted to have it, and they almost quarreled over the matter. But at length, it was settled that the hyena should wear the cloak by day and the jackal by night. After a little while, however, the jackal became discontented with this arrangement, declaring that none of his friends, who were quite different from those of the hyena, could see the splendor of the mantle, and that it was only fair that he should sometimes be allowed to wear it by day. To this, the hyena would by no means consent, and they were on the eve of a quarrel, when the hyena proposed that they should ask the lion to judge between them. The jackal agreed to this, and the hyena wrapped the cloak about him, and they both trotted off to the lion's den. The jackal, who was fond of talking, at once told the story, and when it was finished, the lion turned to the hyena and asked if it was true. "Quite true, Your Majesty," answered the hyena. "Then lay the cloak on the ground at my feet," said the lion, "and I will give my judgment." So the mantle was spread upon the red earth, the hyena and the jackal standing on each side of it. There was silence for a few moments, and then the lion sat up, looking very great and wise. "My judgment is that the garment shall belong wholly to whoever first rings the bell of the nearest mosque at dawn tomorrow. Now go, for much business awaits me." All that night, the hyena sat up, fearing lest the jackal should reach the bell before him, for the mosque was close at hand. With the first streak of dawn, he bounded away to the bell, just as the jackal, who had slept soundly all night, was rising to his feet. "Good luck to you," cried the jackal. And throwing the cloak over his back, he darted away across the plain, and was seen no more by his friend the hyena. After running several miles, the jackal thought he was safe from pursuit. And seeing a lion and another hyena talking together, he strolled up to join them. "Good morning," he said. "May I ask what is the matter? You seem very serious about something." "Pray sit down," answered the lion. "We were wondering in which direction we should go to find the best dinner. The hyena wishes to go to the forest, and I to the mountains. What do you say?" "Well, as I was sauntering over the plain just now, I noticed a flock of sheep grazing, and some of them had wandered into a little valley quite out of sight of the shepherd. If you keep among the rocks, you will never be observed. But perhaps you will allow me to go with you and show you the way?" "You are really very kind," answered the lion. And they crept steadily along, till at length they reached the mouth of the valley, where a ram, a sheep, and a lamb were feeding on the rich grass, unconscious of their danger. "How shall we divide them?" asked the lion in a whisper to the hyena. "Oh, it is easily done," replied the hyena. "The lamb for me, the sheep for the jackal, and the ram for the lion. So I am to have that lean creature, which is nothing but horns, am I?" cried the lion in a rage. "I will teach you to divide things in that manner." And he gave the hyena 2 great blows, which stretched him dead in a moment. Then he turned to the jackal and said, "How would you divide them?" "Quite differently from the hyena," replied the jackal. "You will breakfast off the lamb, you will dine off the sheep, and you will sup off the ram." "Dear me, how clever you are! Who taught you such wisdom?" exclaimed the lion, looking at him admiringly. "The fate of the hyena," answered the jackal, laughing and running off at his best speed, for he saw 2 men armed with spears coming close behind the lion. The jackal continued to run till at last he could run no longer. He flung himself under a tree, panting for breath, when he heard a rustle amongst the grass, and his father's old friend, the hedgehog, appeared before him. "Oh, is it you?" asked the little creature. "How strange that we should meet so far from home. I have just had a narrow escape of my life," gasped the jackal, "and I need some sleep. After that, we must think of something to do to amuse ourselves." And he lay down again and slept soundly for a couple of hours. "Now I am ready," said he. "Have you anything to propose?" "In a valley beyond those trees," answered the hedgehog, "there is a small farmhouse where the best butter in the world is made. I know their ways, and in an hour's time the farmer's wife will be off to milk the cows, which she keeps at some distance. We could easily get in at the window of the shed where she keeps the butter, and I will watch, lest someone should come unexpectedly. While you have a good meal Then you shall watch, and I will eat." "That sounds a good plan," replied the jackal, and they set off together. But when they reached the farmhouse, the jackal said to the hedgehog, "Go in and fetch the pots of butter, and I will hide them in a safe place." "Oh no," cried the hedgehog, "I really couldn't. They would find out directly. And besides, it is so different just eating a little now and then." "Do as I bid you at once," said the jackal, looking at the hedgehog so sternly that the little fellow dared say no more, and soon rolled the jars to the window, where the jackal lifted them out one by one. When they were all in a row before him, he gave a sudden start. "Run for your life," he whispered to his companion. "I see the woman coming over the hill." And the hedgehog, his heart beating, set off as fast as he could. The jackal remained where he was, shaking with laughter, for the woman was not in sight at all. And he had only sent the hedgehog away because he did not want him to know where the jars of butter were buried. But every day he stole out to their hiding place and had a delicious feast. At length, one morning, the hedgehog suddenly said, "You never told me what you did with those jars?" "Oh, I hid them safely till the farm people should have forgotten all about them," replied the jackal. "But as they are still searching for them, we must wait a little longer. And then I'll bring them home, and we will share them between us." So the hedgehog waited and waited. But every time he asked if there was no chance of getting jars of butter, the jackal put him off with some excuse. After a while, the hedgehog became suspicious and said, "I should like to know where you have hidden them. Tonight, when it is quite dark, you shall show me the place." "I really can't tell you," answered the jackal. "You talk so much that you would be sure to confide the secret to somebody, and then we should have had our trouble for nothing, besides running the risk of our necks being broken by the farmer. I can see that he is getting disheartened, and very soon he will give up the search. Have patience, just a little longer." The hedgehog said no more and pretended to be satisfied. But when some days had gone by, he woke the jackal, who was sleeping soundly after a hunt which had lasted several hours. "I have just had notice," remarked the hedgehog, shaking him, "that my family wish to have a banquet tomorrow, and they have invited you to it. Will you come?" "Certainly," answered the jackal, "with pleasure. But as I have to go out in the morning, you can meet me on the road." "That will do very well," replied the hedgehog, and the jackal went to sleep again, for he was obliged to be up early. Punctual to the moment, the hedgehog arrived at the place appointed for their meeting, and as the jackal was not there, he sat down and waited for him. "Ah, there you are," he cried when the dusky yellow form at last turned the corner. "I had nearly given you up. Indeed, I almost wish you had not come, for I hardly know where I shall hide you." "Why should you hide me anywhere?" asked the jackal. "What is the matter with you?" "Well, so many of the guests have brought their dogs and mules with them, that I fear it may hardly be safe for you to go amongst them." "No, don't run off that way," he added quickly, "because there is another troop that are coming over the hill. Lie down here, and I will throw these sacks over you. And keep still for your life, whatever happens." And what did happen was that when the jackal was lying covered up under a little hill, the hedgehog set a great stone rolling, which crushed him to death. The Adventures of the Younger Son of the Jackal. Conte Berberes. Now that the father and elder brother were both dead, all that was left of the jackal family was one son, who was no less cunning than the others had been. He did not like staying in the same place any better than they, and nobody ever knew in what part of the country he might be found next. One day, when we was wandering about, he beheld a nice bet sheep, which was cropping the grass, and seemed quite contented with her lot. "Good morning," said the jackal. "I am so glad to see you. I have been looking for you everywhere." "For me?" answered the sheep in an astonished voice. "But we have never met before." "No, but I have heard of you." "Oh, you don't know what fine things I have heard." Well, some people have all the luck." "You are very kind, I am sure," answered the sheep, not knowing which way to look. "Is there any way in which I can help you? There is something that I had set my heart on, though I hardly like to propose it on so short an acquaintance. But from what people have told me, I thought that you and I might keep house together comfortably if you would only agree to try. I have several fields belonging to me, and if they are kept well watered, they bear wonderful crops. Perhaps I might come for a short time," said the sheep, with a little hesitation. "And if we do not get on, we can part company." "Oh, thank you, cried the jackal. "Do not let us lose a moment." And he held out his paw in such an inviting manner that the sheep got up and trotted beside him till they reached home. "Now," said the jackal, "you go to the well and fetch the water, and I will pour it into the trenches that run between the patches of corn." And as he did so, he sang lustily. The work was very hard, but the sheep did not grumble, and by was rewarded at seeing the little green heads poking themselves through earth. After that, the hot sun ripened them quickly, and soon harvest time was come. Then the grain was cut and ground and ready for sale. When everything was complete, the jackal said to the sheep, "Now let us divide it, so that we can each do what we like with his share." "You do it," answered the sheep. "Here are the scales. You must weigh it carefully." So the jackal began to weigh it, and when he had finished, he counted out loud, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parts for the jackal, and 1 part for the sheep. If she likes it, she can take it. If not, she can leave it. The sheep looked at the 2 heaps in silence, one so large, the other so small. And then she answered, "Wait for a minute while I fetch some sacks to carry away my share." But it was not sacks that the sheep wanted, for as soon as the jackal could no longer see her, she set forth at her best pace to the home of the greyhound, where she arrived, panting with the haste she had made. "Oh, good uncle, help me, I pray you," she cried as soon as she could speak. "Why, what is the matter?" asked the greyhound, looking up with astonishment. "I beg you to return with me and frighten the jackal into paying me what he owes me," answered the sheep. "For months we have lived together, and I have twice every day drawn the water, while he only poured it into the trenches. Together we have reaped our harvest, and now, when the moment to divide our crop has come, he has taken 7 parts for himself, and only left 1 for me." She finished, and giving herself a twist, passed her woolly tail across her eyes, while the greyhound watched her, but held his peace. Then he said, "Bring me a sack," and the sheep hastened away to fetch one. Very soon she returned, and laid the sack down before him. "Open it wide, that I may get in," cried he. And when he was comfortably rolled up inside, he bade the sheep take him on her back, and hasten to the place where she had left the jackal. She found him waiting for her, and pretending to be asleep, though she clearly saw him wink one of his eyes. However, she took no notice, but throwing the sack roughly on the ground, she exclaimed, "Now measure." At this the jackal got up, and going to the heap of grain, which lay close by, he divided it as before into 8 portions, 7 for himself and 1 for the sheep. "What are you doing that for?" asked she indignantly. "You know quite well that it was I who drew the water, and you who only poured it into the trenches." "You are mistaken," answered the jackal. "It was I who drew the water, and you who poured it into the trenches. Anybody will tell you that. If you like, I will ask those people who are digging there." "Very well," replied the sheep. And the jackal called out, "Ho, you diggers, tell me, who was it you heard singing over the work?" "Why, it was you, of course, jackal. You sang so loud that the whole world might have heard you. And who it is that sings? He who draws the water, or he who empties it? Why, certainly he who draws the water. You hear? Said the jackal, turning to the sheep. Now come and carry away your own portion, or else I shall take it for myself. You have got the better of me, answered the sheep, and I suppose I must confess myself beaten. But as I bear no malice, go and eat some of the dates that I have brought in that sack. And the jackal, who loved dates, ran instantly back and tore open the mouth of the sack. But just as he was about to plunge his nose in, he saw 2 brown eyes calmly looking at him. In an instant, he had let fall the flap of the sack and bounded back to where the sheep was standing. I was only in fun, and you have brought my uncle the greyhound. Take away the sack, we will make the division over again. And he began rearranging the heaps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. For my mother the sheep, and 1 for the jackal, counted he, casting timid glances all the while at the sack. Now you can take your share and go, said the sheep. And the jackal did not need twice telling. Whenever the sheep looked up, she still saw him flying across the plain. And for all I know, he may be flying across it still. The 3 treasures of the giants. Conte Berber par René Basset. Long, long ago, there lived an old man and his wife who had 3 sons. The eldest was called Martin, the second Michael, while the third was named Jack. One evening, they were all seated round the table, eating their supper of bread and milk. "Martin," said the old man suddenly, "I feel that I cannot live much longer. You, as the eldest, will inherit this hut. But if you value my blessing, be good to your mother and brothers." "Certainly, father. How can you suppose I should do them wrong?" replied Martin indignantly, helping himself to all the best bits in the dish as he spoke. The old man saw nothing, but Michael looked on in surprise, and Jack was so astonished that he quite forgot to eat his own supper. A little while after, the father fell ill and sent for his sons, who were out hunting, to bid him farewell. After giving good advice to the 2 eldest, he turned to Jack. "My boy," he said, "you have not got quite as much sense as other people, but if heaven has deprived you of some of your wits, it was given you a kind heart. Always listen to what it says, and take heed to the words of your mother and brothers, as well as you are able." So saying, the old man sank back on his pillows and died. The cries of grief uttered by Martin and Michael sounded through the house, but Jack remained by the bedside of his father, still and silent, as if he were dead also. At length he got up, and going into the garden, hid himself in some trees, and wept like a child, while his two brothers made ready for the funeral. No sooner was the old man buried than Martin and Michael agreed that they would go into the world together to seek their fortunes, while Jack stayed at home with their mother. Jack would have liked nothing better than to sit and dream by the fire, but the mother, who was very old herself, declared that there was no work for him to do, and that he must seek it with his brothers. So, one fine morning, all three set out. Martin and Michael carried 2 great bags full of food, but Jack carried nothing. This made his brothers very angry, for the day was hot and the bags were heavy, and about noon they sat down under a tree and began to eat. Jack was as hungry as they were, but he knew that it was no use asking for anything, and he threw himself under another tree and wept bitterly. "Another time, perhaps you won't be so lazy and will bring food for yourself," said Martin. But to his surprise, Jack answered, "You are a nice pair. You talk of seeking your fortunes so as not to be a burden on our mother. And you begin by carrying off all the food she has in the house." This reply was so unexpected that for some moments neither of the brothers made any answer. Then they offered their brother some of their food, and when he had finished eating, they went their way once more. Towards evening, they reached a small hut, and knocking at the door, asked if they might spend the night there. The man, who was a woodcutter, invited them in, and begged them to sit down to supper. Martin thanked him, but being very proud, explained that it was only shelter they wanted, as they had plenty of food with them. And he and Michael at once opened their bags and began to eat, while Jack hid himself in a corner. The wife, on seeing this, took pity on him and called him to come and share their supper, which he gladly did, and very good he found it. At this, Martin regretted deeply that he had been so foolish as to refuse, for his bits of bread and cheese seemed very hard when he smelt the savory soup his brother was enjoying. "He shan't have such a chance again," thought he. And the next morning, he insisted on plunging into a thick forest where they were likely to meet nobody. For a long time they wandered hither and thither, for they had no path to guide them. But at last they came upon a wide clearing, in the midst of which stood a castle. Jack shouted with delight, but Martin, who was in a bad temper, said sharply, "We must have taken a wrong turning. Let us go back." "Idiot," replied Michael, who was hungry too, and, like many people when they are hungry, very cross also. "We set out to travel through the world, and what does it matter if we go to the right or to the left?" And and, without another word, took the path to the castle, closely followed by Jack, and after a moment by Martin likewise. The door of the castle stood open, and they entered a great hall and looked about them. Not a creature was to be seen, and suddenly Martin, he did not know why, felt a little frightened. He would have left the castle at once, but stopped when Jack boldly walked up to a door in the wall, and opened it. He could not, for very shame, be outdone by his younger brother, and passed behind him into another splendid hall, which was filled from floor to ceiling with great pieces of copper money. The sight quite dazzled Martin and Michael, who emptied all the provisions that remained out of their bags, and heaped them up instead with handfuls of copper. Scarcely had they done this when Jack threw open another door, and this time it led to a hall filled with silver. In an instant, his brothers had turned their bags upside down, so that the copper money tumbled out onto the floor, and were shoveling in handfuls of the silver instead. They had hardly finished when Jack opened yet a third door, and all three fell back in amazement, for this room has a mass of gold, so bright that their eyes grew sore as they looked at it. However, they soon recovered from their surprise, and quickly emptied their bags of silver, and filled them with gold instead. When they would hold no more, Martin said, "We had better hurry off now, lest somebody else should come, and we might not know what to do." And followed by Michael, he hastily left the castle. Jack lingered behind for a few minutes to put pieces of gold, silver, and copper into his pocket, and to eat the food that his brothers had thrown down in the first room. Then he went after them, and found them lying down to rest in the midst of a forest. It was near sunset, and Martin began to feel hungry. So, when Jack arrived, he bade him return to the castle and bring the bread and cheese that they had left there. "It is hardly worth doing that," answered Jack, "for I picked up the pieces and ate them myself." At this reply, both brothers were beside themselves with anger, and fell upon the boy, beating him and calling him names till they were quite tired. "Go where you like," cried Martin with a final kick, "but never come near us again." And poor Jack ran weeping into the woods. The next morning, his brothers went home and bought a beautiful house where they lived with their mother like great lords. Jack remained for some hours in hiding, thankful to be safe from his tormentors. But when no one came to trouble him, and his back did not ache so much, he began to think what he had better do. At length, he made up his mind to go to the cast and take away as much money with him as would enable him to live in comfort for the rest of his life. This being decided, he sprang up, and set out along the path which led to the castle. As before, the door stood open, and he went on till he had reached the Hall of Gold, and there he took off his jacket and tied the sleeves together so that it might make a kind of bag. He then began to pour in the gold by handfuls, when, all at once, a noise like thunder shook the castle. This was followed by a voice, hoarse as that of a bull, which cried, "I smell the smell of a man." And 2 giants entered. "So, little worm, it is you who steal our treasures," exclaimed the biggest. "Well, we have got you now, and we will cook you for supper." But here the other giant drew him aside, and for a moment or two they whispered together. At length the first giant spoke. "To please my friend, I will spare your life on condition that, for the future, you shall guard our treasures. If you are hungry, take this little table and rap on it, saying as you do so, 'The dinner of an emperor,' and you will get as much food as you want." With a light heart, Jack promised all that was asked of him, and for some days enjoyed himself mightily. He had everything he could wish for, and did nothing from morning till night. But by and by he began to get very tired of it all. "Let the giants guard their treasures themselves," he said to himself at last. "I am going away, but I will leave all the gold and silver behind me, and will take naught but you, my good little table." So, tucking the table under his arm, he started off for the forest. But he did not linger there long, and soon found himself in the fields on the other side. There he saw an old man who begged Jack to give him something to eat. "You could not have asked a better person," answered Jack cheerfully, and signing to him to sit down with him under a tree, he set the table in front of them and struck it 3 times, crying, "The dinner of an emperor!" He had hardly uttered the words when fish and meat of all kinds appeared on it. "That is a clever trick of yours," said the old man when he had eaten as much as he wanted. "Give it to me in exchange for a treasure I have, which is still better. Do you see this cornet? Well, you have only to tell it that you wish for an army, and you will have as many soldiers as you require." Now, since he had been left to himself, Jack had grown ambitious. So, after a moment's hesitation, he took the cornet and gave the table in exchange. The old man bade him farewell and set off down one path, while Jack chose another. And for a long time he was quite pleased with his new possession. Then, as he felt hungry, he wished for his table back again, as no house was in sight, and he wanted some supper badly. All at once he remembered his cornet, and a wicked thought entered his mind. 200 hussars! Forward! cried he, and the neighing of horses and the clanking of swords were heard close at hand. The officer, who rode at their head, approached Jack and politely inquired what he wished them to do. "A mile or two along that road," answered Jack, "you will find an old man carrying a table. Take the table from him and bring it to me." The officer saluted and went back to his men, who started at a gallop to do Jack's bidding. In 10 minutes, they had returned, bearing the table with them. "That is all, thank you," said Jack, and the soldiers disappeared inside the cornet. Oh, what a good supper Jack had that night, quite forgetting that he owed it to a mean trick. The next day, he breakfasted early, and then walked on towards the nearest town. On the way thither, he met another old man, who begged for something to eat. "Certainly, you shall have something to eat," replied Jack, and placing the table on the ground, he cried, "The dinner of an emperor," when all sorts of food dishes appeared. At first, the old man ate quite greedily and said nothing, but after his hunger was satisfied, he turned to Jack and said, "That is a very clever trick of yours. Give the table to me, and you shall have something still better." "I don't believe that there is anything better," answered Jack. "Yes, there is. Here is my bag. It will give you as many castles as you can possibly want." Jack thought for a moment. Then he replied, "Very well, I will exchange with you." And passing the table to the old man, he hung the bag over his arm. 5 minutes later, he summoned 500 lancers out of the cornet and bade them go after the old man and fetch back the table. Now that by his cunning he had obtained possession of the 3 magic objects, he resolved to return to his native place. Smearing his face with dirt and tearing his clothes so as to look like a beggar, he stopped the passers-by and, on pretense of seeking money or food, he questioned them about the village gossip. In this manner, he learned that his brothers had become great men, much respected in all the country round. When he heard that, he lost no time in going to the door of their fine house and imploring them to give him food and shelter. But the only thing he got was hard words and a command to beg elsewhere. At length, however, at their mother's entreaty, he was told that he might pass the night in the stable. Here he waited until everybody in the house was sound asleep, when he drew his bag from under his cloak and desired that a castle might appear in that place. And the cornet gave him soldiers to guard the castle, while the table furnished him with a good supper. In the morning, he caused it all to vanish, and when his brothers entered the stable, they found him lying on the straw. Jack remained here for many days, doing nothing, and, as far as anybody knew, eating nothing. This conduct puzzled his brothers greatly, and they put such constant questions to him that at length he told them the secret of the table, and even gave a dinner to them, which far outdid any they had ever seen or heard of. But though they had solemnly promised to reveal nothing, somehow or other the tale leaked out, and before long reached the ears of the king himself. That very evening, his chamberlain arrived at Jack's dwelling, with a request from the king that he might borrow the table for 3 days. "Very well," answered Jack. "You can take it back with you. But tell His Majesty that if he does not return it at the end of the 3 days, I will make war upon him." So the chamberlain carried away the table and took it straight to the king, telling him at the same time of Jack's threat, at which they both laughed till their sides ached. Now the king was so delighted with the table and the dinners it gave him, that when the 3 days were over, he could not make up his mind to part with it. Instead, he sent for his carpenter and bade him copy it exactly. And when it was done, he told his chamberlain to return it to Jack with his best thanks. It happened to be dinner time, and Jack invited the chamberlain, who knew nothing of the trick, to stay and dine with him. The good man, who had eaten several excellent meals provided by the table in the last 3 days, accepted the invitation with pleasure, even though he was to dine in a stable, and sat down on the straw beside Jack. "The dinner of an emperor!" cried Jack. But not even a morsel of cheese made its appearance. "The dinner of an emperor!" shouted Jack in a voice of thunder. Then the truth dawned on him, and crushing the table between his hands, he turned to the chamberlain, who, bewildered and half frightened, was wondering how to get away. "Tell your false king that tomorrow I will destroy his castle as easily as I have broken this table." The chamberlain hastened back to the palace and gave the king Jack's message, at which he laughed more than before, and called all his courtiers to hear the story. But they were not quite so merry when they woke next morning and beheld 10,000 horsemen and as many archers surrounding the palace. The king saw it was useless to hold out, and he took the white flag of truce in one hand and the real table in the other, and set out to look for Jack. "I committed a crime," said he, "but I will do my best to make up for it. Here is your table, which I own with shame that I tried to steal, and you shall have besides my daughter as your wife." There was no need to delay the marriage, when the table was able to furnish the most splendid banquet that ever was seen. And after everyone had eaten and drunk as much as they wanted, Jack took his bag and commanded a castle filled with all sorts of treasures to arise in the park for himself and his bride. At this proof of his power, the king's heart died within him. "Your magic is greater than mine," he said. "And you are young and strong, while I am old and tired. Take, therefore, the scepter from my hand, and my crown from my head, and rule my people better than I have done." So at last, Jack's ambition was satisfied. He could not hope to be more than king. And as long as he had his cornet to provide him with soldiers, he was secure against his enemies. He never forgave his brothers for the way they had treated him, though he presented his mother with a beautiful castle and everything she could possibly wish for. In the center of his own palace was a treasure chamber, and in this chamber, the table, the cornet, and the bag were kept as the most prized of all his possessions, and not a week passed without a visit from King John to make sure they were safe. He reigned long and well, and died a very old man, beloved by his people. But his good example was not followed by his sons and his grandsons. They grew so proud that they were ashamed to think that the founder of their race had once been a poor boy. And as they and all the world could not fail to remember it, as long as the table, the cornet, and the bag were shown in the treasure chamber, one king, more foolish than the rest, thrust them into a dark and damp cellar. For some time, the kingdom remained, though it became weaker and weaker every year that passed. Then, one day, a rumor reached the king that a large army was marching against him. Vaguely, he recollected some tales he had heard about a magic cornet which could provide as many soldiers as would serve to conquer the earth, and which had been removed by his grandfather to a cellar. Thither he hastened that he might renew his power once more, and in that black and slimy spot he found the treasures indeed. But the table fell to pieces as he touched it. In the cornet there remained only a few fragments of white leathern belts which the rats had gnawed, and in the bag nothing but broken bits of stone. And the king bowed his head to the doom that awaited him, and in his heart cursed the ruin wrought by the pride and foolishness of himself and his forefathers. The Rover of the Plain, from Contes Populaires Slaves par Louis Leger. A long way off, near the sea coast of the east of Africa, there dwelt, once upon a time, a man and his wife. They had 2 children, a son and a daughter, whom they loved very much, and, like parents in other countries, they often talked of the fine marriages the young people would make someday. Out there, both boys and girls marry early, and very soon, it seemed to the mother, a message was sent by a rich man on the other side of the great hills, offering a fat herd of oxen in exchange for the girl. Everyone in the house and in the village rejoiced, and the maiden was dispatched to her new home. when all was quiet again, the father said to his son, "Now that we own such a splendid troop of oxen, you had better hasten and get yourself a wife, lest some illness should overtake them. Already we have seen in the villages round about 1 or 2 damsels whose parents would gladly part with them for less than half the herd. Therefore tell us which you like best, and we will buy her for you." But the son answered, "Not so. The maidens I have seen do not please me. If indeed must marry, let me travel and find a wife for myself." "It shall be as you wish," said the parents. "But if by and by trouble should come of it, it will be your fault and not ours." The youth, however, would not listen, and bidding his father and mother farewell, set out on his search. Far, far away he wandered, over mountains and across rivers, till he reached a village where the people were quite different from those of his own race. He glanced about him and noticed that the girls were fair to look upon, as they pounded maize or stewed something that smelt very nice in earthen pots, especially if you were hot and tired. And when one of the maidens turned round and offered the stranger some dinner, he made up his mind that he would wed her and nobody else. So he sent a message to her parents, asking their leave to take her for his wife, and they came next day to bring their answer. "We will give you our daughter," said they, "if you can pay a good price for her. Never was there so hard-working a girl, and how we shall do without her we cannot tell. Still, no doubt your father and mother will come themselves and bring the price?" "No, I have the price with me," replied the young man, laying down a handful of gold pieces. "Here it is. Take it." The old couple's eyes glittered greedily, but custom forbade them to touch the price before all was arranged. "At least," said they, after a moment's pause, "we may expect them to fetch your wife to her new home." "No, they are not used to traveling," answered the bridegroom. "Let the ceremony be performed without delay, and we will set forth at once. It is a long journey." Then the parents called in the girl who was lying in the sun outside the hut, and in the presence of all the village, a goat was killed. The sacred dance took place, and a blessing was said over the heads of the young people. After that, the bride was led aside by her father, whose duty it was to bestow on her some parting advice as to her conduct in her married life. "Be good to your husband's parents," added he, "and always do the will of your husband." And the girl nodded her head obediently. Next, it was the mother's turn, and, as was the custom of the tribe, she spoke to her daughter. "Will you choose which of your sisters shall go with you to cut your wood and carry your water?" "I do not want any of them," answered she. they are no use. They will drop the wood and spill the water. Then will you have any of the other children? There are enough to spare?" asked the mother again. But the bride said quickly, "I will have none of them. You must give me our buffalo, the Rover of the plain. He alone shall serve me." "What folly you talk!" cried the parents. "Give you our buffalo, the Rover of the plain? Why, you know that our life depends on him. Here he is well fed and lies on soft grass. But how can you tell what will befall him in another country? The food may be bad, he will die of hunger, and if he dies, we die also." "No, no," said the bride. "I can look after him as well as you. Get him ready, for the sun is sinking, and it is time we set forth." So she went away and put together a small filled with healing herbs, a horn that she used in tending sick people, a little knife, and a calabash containing deer fat. And hiding these about her, she took leave of her father and mother and started across the mountains by the side of her husband. But the young man did not see the buffalo that followed them, which had left his home to be the servant of his wife. No one ever knew how the news spread to the kraal that the young man was coming back, bringing a wife with him. But somehow or other, when the two entered the village, every man and woman was standing in the road, uttering shouts of welcome. "Ah, you are not dead, after all," cried they, "and have found a wife to your liking, though you would have none of our girls. Well, well, you have chosen your own path, and if ill comes of it, beware lest you grumble." Next day, the husband took his wife to the fields and showed her which were his and which belonged to his mother. The girl listened carefully to all he told her and walked with him back to the hut. But close to the door, she stopped and said, "I have dropped my necklace of beads in the field, and I must go and look for it." But in truth, she had done nothing of the sort, and it was only an excuse to go and seek the buffalo. The beast was crouching under a tree when she came up, and snorted with pleasure at the sight of her. "You can roam about this field, and this, she said, "for they belong to my husband, and that is his wood, where you may hide yourself. But the other fields are his mother's, so beware lest you touch them." "I will beware," answered the buffalo, and patting his head, the girl left him. Oh, how much better a servant he was than any of the little girls the bride had refused to bring with her. If she wanted water, she had only to cross the patch of maize behind the hut and seek out the place where the buffalo lay hidden, and put down her pail beside him. Then she would sit at her ease while he went to the lake and brought the bucket back brimming over. If she wanted wood, he would break the branches off the trees and lay them at her feet. And the villagers watched her return laden, and said to each other, "Surely the girls of her country are stronger than our girls, for none of them could cut so quickly or carry so much." But then nobody knew that she had a buffalo for a servant. Only all this time she never gave the poor buffalo anything to eat, because she had just one dish, out of which she and her husband ate, while in her old home there was a dish put aside expressly for the rover of the plain. The buffalo bore it as long as he could. But one day, when his mistress bade him go to the lake and fetch water, his knees almost gave way from hunger. He kept silence, however, till the evening, when he said to his mistress, "I am nearly starved. I have not touched food since I came here. I can work no more." "Alas," answered she, "what can I do? I have only one dish in the house. You will have to steal some beans from the fields. Take a few here and a few there, but be sure not to take too many from one place, or the owner may notice it." Now the buffalo had always lived an honest life, but if his mistress did not feed him, he must get food for himself. So that night, when all the village was asleep, he came out from the wood and ate a few beans here and a few there, as his mistress had bidden him. And when at last his hunger was satisfied, he crept back to his lair. But a buffalo is not a fairy, and the next morning, when the women arrived to work in the fields, they stood still with astonishment and said to each other, "Just look at this. A savage beast has been destroying our crops, and we can see the traces of his feet." And they hurried to their homes to tell their tale. In the evening, the girl crept out to the buffalo's hiding place and said to him, "They perceived what happened, of course. So tonight you had better seek your supper further off." And the buffalo nodded his head and followed her counsel. But in the morning, when these women also went out to work, the races of hoofs were plainly to be seen, and they hastened to tell their husbands, and begged them to bring their guns and to watch for the robber. It happened that the stranger girl's husband was the best marksman in all the village, and he hid himself behind the trunk of a tree and waited. The buffalo, thinking that they would probably make a search for him in the fields he had laid waste the evening before, returned to the bean patch belonging to his mistress. The young man saw him coming with amazement. "Why, it is a buffalo!" cried he. "I never have beheld one in this country before." And raising his gun, he aimed just behind the ear. The buffalo gave a leap into the air and then fell dead. "It was a good shot," said the young man, and he ran to the village to tell them that the thief was punished. When he entered his hut, he found his wife, who had somehow heard the news, twisting herself to and fro and shedding tears. "Are you ill?" asked he, and she answered, "Yes, I have pains all over my body." But she was not ill at all, only very unhappy at the death of the buffalo which had served her so well. Her husband felt anxious and sent for the medicine man, but though she pretended to listen to him, she threw all his medicine out of the door directly he had gone away. With the first rays of light, the whole village was awake, and the women set forth armed with baskets, and the men with knives, in order to cut up the buffalo. Only the girl remained in her hut, and after a while, she too went to join them, groaning and weeping as she walked along. "What are you doing here?" asked her husband when he saw her. "If you are ill, you are better at home." "Oh, I could not stay alone in the village," said she. And her mother-in-law left off her work to come and scold her, and to tell her that she would kill herself if she did such foolish things. But the girl would not listen, and sat down and looked on. When they had divided the buffalo's flesh, and each woman had the family portion in her basket, the stranger wife got up and said, "Let me have the head." "You could never carry anything so heavy," answered the men, "and now you are ill besides." "You do not know how strong I am," answered she. And at last they gave it her. She did not walk to the village with the others, but lingered behind, and instead of entering her hut, she slipped into the little shed where the pots for cooking and storing maize were kept. Then she laid down the buffalo's head and sat beside it. Her husband came to seek her and begged her to leave the shed and go to bed, as she must be tired out. But the girl would not stir, neither would she attend to the words of her mother-in-law. "I wish you would leave me alone," she answered crossly. "It is impossible to sleep if somebody is always coming in." And she turned her back on them, and would not even eat the food they had brought. So they went away, and the young man soon stretched himself out on his mat. But his wife's odd conduct made him anxious, and he lay awake all night, listening. When all was still, the girl made a fire and boiled some water in a pot. As soon as it was quite hot, she shook in the medicine that she had brought from home, and then, taking the buffalo's head, she made incisions with her little knife behind the ear and close to the temple where the shot had struck him. Next, she applied the horn to the spot and blew with all her force till, at length, the blood began to move. After that, she spread some of the deer fat out of the calabash over the wound, which she held in the steam of the hot water. Last of all, she sang in a low voice a dirge over the Rover of the plain. As she chanted the final words, the head moved, and the limbs came back. The buffalo began to feel alive again, and shook his horns, and stood up, and stretched himself. Unluckily, it was just at this moment that the husband said to himself, "I wonder if she is crying still, and what is the matter with her? Perhaps I had better go and see." And he got up, and calling her by name, went out to the shed. "Go away! I don't want you!" she cried angrily. But it was too late. The buffalo had fallen to the ground dead, and with the wound in his head as before. The young man who, unlike most of his tribe, was afraid of his wife, returned to his bed without having seen anything, but wondering very much what she could be doing all this time. After waiting a few minutes, she began her task over again, and at the end, the buffalo stood on his feet as before. But just as the girl was rejoicing that her work was completed, in came the husband once more to see what his wife was doing. And this time he sat himself down in the hut and said that he wished to watch whatever was going on. Then the girl took up the pitcher and all her other things and left the shed, trying for the third time to bring the buffalo back to life. She was too late. The dawn was already breaking, and the head fell to the ground, dead and corrupt as it was before. The girl entered the hut where her husband and his mother were getting ready to go out. "I want to go down to the lake and bathe," said she. "But you could never walk so far," answered they. "You are so tired as it is that you can hardly stand." However, in spite of their warnings, the girl left the hut in the direction of the lake. Very soon she came back weeping and sobbed out, "I met someone in the village who lives in my country, and he told me that my mother is very, very ill, and if I do not go to her at once, she will be dead before I arrive. I will return as soon as I can, and now farewell." And she set forth in the direction of the mountains. But this story was not true. She knew nothing about her mother, only she wanted an excuse to go home and tell her family that their prophecies had come true, and that the buffalo was dead. Balancing her basket on her head, she walked along, and directly she had left the village behind her, she broke out into the song of the Rover of the plain. And at last, at the end of the day, she came to the group of huts where her parents lived. Her friends all ran to meet her, and weeping, she told them that the buffalo was dead. This sad news spread like lightning through the country, and the people flocked from far and near to bewail the loss of the beast who had been their pride. "If you had only listened to us," they cried, "he would be alive now. But you refused all the little girls we offered you, and would have nothing but the buffalo. And remember what the medicine man said. If the buffalo dies, you die also." So they bewailed their fate, one to the other. And for a while they did not perceive that the girl's husband was sitting in their midst, leaning his gun against a tree. Then one man, turning, beheld him, and bowed mockingly. "Hail, murderer! Hail! You have slain us all!" The young man stared, not knowing what he meant, and answered wonderingly, "I shot a buffalo. Is that why you call me a murderer? A buffalo, yes, but the servant of your wife. It was he who carried the wood and drew the water. Did you not know it?" "No, I did not know it," replied the husband in surprise. "Why did no one tell me? Of course I should not have shot him." "Well, he is dead," answered they, "and we must die too." At this, the girl took a cup in which some poisonous herbs had been crushed, and holding it in her hands, she wailed, "Oh, my father, Rover of the plain!" Then, drinking a deep draught from it, fell back dead. One by one, her parents, her brothers, and her sisters drank also and died, singing a dirge to the memory of the buffalo. The girl's husband looked on with horror and returned sadly home across the mountains, and entering his hut, threw himself on the ground. At first, he was too tired to speak, but at length he raised his head and told all the story to his father and mother, who sat watching him. When he had finished, they shook their heads and said, "Now you see that we spoke no idle words when we told you that ill would come of your marriage. We offered you a good and hard-working wife, and you would have none of her. And it is not only your wife you have lost, but your fortune also. For who will give you back your money if they are all dead?" "It is true, O my father," answered the young man. But in his heart he thought more of the loss of his wife than of the money he had given for her.